All the currently available evidence that we have would suggest that training a muscle once a week on a body part split is perfectly fine. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. This is one of these topics that I do feel a degree of responsibility for discussing and making people aware of, because on social media, a decade ago, I was one of the people out there who was promoting the evidence-based idea that we needed higher frequencies of training to get the most muscle growth for natural lifters, for drug-free lifters. And we need to be clear on that. That was based upon some older studies that turned out to not be very good. But a lot of us back in the day were reading those studies and going, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Looks like muscle protein synthesis is returning to normal within 48 hours, of training a muscle. And therefore, we probably need to be hitting muscles 2, maybe 3 times a week. And for novices, there's nothing wrong with that. It worked very, very well. And that was actually one of the reasons so many of us pushed it, because we saw novice lifters get great results doing this. It's like we were having people do full body programs 3 days a week. And we were looking at that going, a lot of the old school guys in the 50s and 60s before, people became more enhanced like they are now, they were getting phenomenal results doing full body 3 days a week. So it clearly works. And so we saw it working in novice lifters. A lot of us wrote programs for that. We prescribed it. People got good results doing it, right? And there were no issues with that. It worked great. So for all intents and purposes, what we all did for years and years, we were like, yeah, this makes sense. And eventually we took people over to splitting it up more, a lot of upper, lower 4-day-a-week programs, which I ran for myself, tons of my clients, and tons of high-level strength athletes did that. And the only problem with that was even the high-level strength athletes, there were just as many elite ones who did 3-day splits, right? Squat, bench, deadlift splits, training 3 days a week did really, really well though. So that kind of threw a wrench in that idea that all the best in the world train the other way, but we also saw some really high frequency. On the other hand, those really high frequency power lifters tended to break really easy, right? Everyone who watched them, the guys who were all benching heavy 4 days a week and all that stuff, how many of them are still lifting? How many of them got beat up, banged up, injured? They have about a 8 to 10 year run and then they're done. They're too injured to keep getting stronger. Yet we see the guys who did the lower frequencies continue in for a much, much longer period of time. So there is that overuse concern. So that kind of, again, throws a little bit of a wrench in that idea. And again, I was one of the people who promoted that hey, we need the twice a week for every lift, for every muscle, just to keep the muscle protein synthesis up. But the reality is, here's the problem with that. How do we reconcile that with the real world? Because we saw so many people who got great gains doing body part splits, also called bro splits. There were plenty of people who were jacked and strong, and the explanation was always, well, they're all probably, using stuff, and that's how they're getting away with it, right? Except that the people who did the higher frequencies on this stuff didn't seem to get any better results. And here's the other thing. How many drug-free people do we all see out there who still got good results doing it? It was never a problem. In fact, I've observed in my life, as I've said, people who only trained 3 days a week on splits, not even full body, who had great results, right? Both physique-wise and strength-wise. So, we always reconciled it with, well, we've got this data, there's these studies here, and, and again, it's probably just all the stuff they're taking. Except that again, that doesn't fly, does it? Because people did get great results who weren't on stuff too. Completely natural. So, we come around full circle. And here's the problem with exercise science as it pertains to hypertrophy, as I and many others have said, it's not a very good area of science. The studies are not very well conducted. They have too small a sample sizes, too small a funding, they're too short in duration, and that is by no means the fault of the researcher. So when you bring that up, some of the researchers get a little upset because it's, poo-pooing on their work, but the problem is they all know it's true. Right? And it's nothing against them personally. It's not saying they're not doing a good job. in the environment they're forced to be in. It's saying, hey, bro, no one gave you $10 million and 1,000 test subjects. Again, no fault of their own other than they chose to go into a field of study that just doesn't have as much interest in funding. Okay? They chose their passion over choosing a field that's going to have more demand. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they chose their passion in life. So the issue, though, is that the studies are not always that good. So then we come around to what is more the more modern studies have said, it doesn't seem to matter. We see plenty of studies showing that when volume is equal, they get just as much growth training a muscle once a week versus twice or 3 times. Now, you also get people who say, but the volumes aren't equal because, you know, if you split it up, you're fresher and you can do bigger weights. Well, maybe on the first lift, but not on the other body parts, right? You can't say that's universally true because if you start with a bench press on the start of a workout, you're going to be stronger than if you do it after squatting and deadlifting, okay? So that's not true. It's only true on the first exercise. But then what we mean by the equal volume, we don't mean equal tonnage. We don't mean, hey, if you did X amount of reps and weight, we mean hard sets. If they do an equal number of challenging hard sets to failure or very close to failure, it doesn't seem to be an advantage. It doesn't seem to cause more hypertrophy at all. What we also find is that when you do more body parts in one day, the closer to full body it gets, the less stimulus the muscles you train last get. Which makes sense. They're just not getting as much fatigue at the individual muscle fiber level because your nervous system is fatigued from the other exercises. Okay, so really that equated volume really only seems to apply to the muscles you're training early. When they do studies on just legs or just arms, and they train on, 9 sets 3 times a week versus, or 9 sets once a week versus 3 sets 3 times a week. But when you start training the whole body, it kind of shows a different result. Shows a very different result. And how many of us who were strength trainers who maybe only did biceps at the end of our upper body workouts ended up with lagging arms? We saw a whole lot in the real world of it matching exactly kind of what we're seeing there. And again, I'm not telling people not to train that way. I'm not saying it's that you can't get great results doing the other method. What I'm saying is there's not necessarily an advantage to those high frequencies. And again, we have to be honest with ourselves about that and look at what the data in the real world shows. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.